I see a lot of similarities between the inflation of the 1970s and the inflation today. Similar terminology being used, similar actions being taken. The first similarity that really hit me, and I noticed this almost immediately the first time I heard the terminology being used, was Jerome Powell trying to claim that there was going to be transitory inflation from everybody coming back from quarantine. And it instantly reminded me of when Nixon said that he was temporarily suspending convertibility of the dollar into gold. And so I like to think of those two dates as being equivalent of each other and how far we are from both of those dates in terms of what's going to happen next. The next thing that strikes me as almost equivalent was the oil shocks. In the 1970s, it was because of the Middle East. Today, it's because of Russia, both of them disrupting oil supplies. Another similarity I see is the president celebrating victory over inflation when it's a very temporary event, right? Nixon said, the rate of increase of inflation is decreasing. Now, what does that mean? Well, the rate of increase of inflation, that kind of implies inflation is still there, so prices are still going up. The inflation rate is also increasing, right? Only the increase in the rate is decreasing, right? So, for example, let's say on January 1st, 1972, let's say the price of something was $100, right? Now, on February 1st, it was going up at a good rate, right? Let's say it's $110. On March 1st, it's, let's say, $125, right? Because the rate of increase of inflation, inflation is increasing, right? So we went from a $10 inflation to a $15 inflation. Maybe the month after that, it's only an $18 inflation, right? So you take 125 plus the 18. On April 1st, that same item is going for $133. And Nixon gets on the podium, well, April 1st, or maybe it's an April Fool's joke now. The rate of increase of inflation is decreasing, right? That's what he could say. And he would be right about that, right? But it was very temporary, obviously, right? Now, the next similarity I see is the action about it, right? So Gerald Ford had a campaign called Whip Inflation Now. And he was blaming consumers and businesses for bidding up prices, right? Wage price spiral kind of action. Well, what is Biden doing? He's blaming people on resigning their jobs, the Great Resignation, right? And another similarity I see is the manipulation in the price of gold and silver. So after 4 decades, gold finally became legal for U.S. citizens to own in 1974. And immediately, the price of gold corrects by almost 50%, right? Kind of reminds me of the situation in Russia. Russia was finally encouraging its citizens to buy gold, and all of a sudden, their currency jumps up like crazy, right? Anyway, so it's almost play by play, right? I'm reading a lot of history about the 1970s to match it up. I suspect what's going to happen is, just like the 1970s, we're going to have to pivot on the interest rates to make inflation wipe out a good part of our national debt before we can raise interest rates to combat inflation, right? Although this time, after we wipe out the national debt, interest rates are going to go up a whole lot higher than they were in the 1970s.